welcome to the service for Gary Stamper. On behalf of his family, I welcome you today. I appreciate you being here. It means a lot to everybody here because we're coming together in a common adoration, a common love, a common appreciation of who Gary was and who Gary continues to be in our hearts and in our memories. So we're just grateful you're here today. I'm Reverend Jay Lang. I'm the senior minister here at the Napa Valley Center for Spiritual Living. I am so happy you're here today and joined us and connected. Part of the reason we're gathered is to share memories of Gary, our favorite memories. Each of us knew him in different ways, unique friendships we had with him. And it's fun to be able to connect with people either during the service or after the service. We'll have a reception out there. And just to find out how they knew Gary and what he meant to them and the love and the light that he brought to this planet while he was here. It's also an opportunity to, if you might have any incomplete feelings, the fact that he was in Panama when he passed, probably none of us had the chance to say goodbye to him. So it's an opportunity to just imagine him as here with us. And if I know Gary, he wouldn't miss this opportunity to be around friends and family. He'd be right in the midst of us. The great thing about Gary is he was great at telling stories and talking about his thoughts and his beliefs, but he was also a great listener, listening to other people's stories and understanding and getting a sense of what their life is. So today, he is here to listen, I'm sure. And we also know that Spirit is with us right now, that universal Spirit. I wear my stole. I don't know if you can see this, but this is a stole from all faiths. And at the center, we believe that there are truths found in all faiths. That Spirit, God, Yahweh, whatever you might call your higher being, your divine intelligence, it's true for all of us, is present here with us now and is all around us. There's nowhere where God is not. So we know right now in our time of grief, our time of sadness, of sorrow, and yet also, interesting enough, a joy and a gratitude for knowing Gary. And what we believe here is Spirit is all around us and can hold all aspects of our feelings today. All of these feelings that we're feeling, that they can be held within the arms of Spirit, and we can feel comforted and reassured that even if we might feel regret or an incompleteness, that that's held within Spirit also. And there's a natural way of healing that happens in this grieving process. In the coming days, the Spirit will continue to be with us. I know in our sadness that we do find gratitude also. There's a mystical poet, his name is Khalil Gibran. I don't know if you've heard of him before, but he had this great quote. It said, "When you are sorrowful deep, look in your heart, and you'll see that in truth you are weeping for that which has been your delight." So there's this connection with sadness and joy, and the more we're willing to feel it, the more capacity we have to feel joy and gratitude as well. So even in our sadness, we celebrate Gary's life, the glorious life he was and the influence he had on all of us. We also, while we're gathered here, have a sacred agreement, a heartfelt purpose in gathering and affirming eternal life. Where Gary is right now depends everything on what you believe. You might imagine him, he's in a transition time, or that he's in heaven, how you perceive that. Or you might perceive that he's light, free of his body and in the astral realms of light. What we ask for you today is that you suspend any beliefs of perceiving him in a particular place, but just know that he's in a place of peace and joy and love. At this center, we believe that we were life and love and peace before we came into this body. And when we leave this body, we are still this same light and love, this soul, if you want to call it, this eternal life, this divine aspect of us. And in that way, we're open to experiencing Gary even after he leaves this body. That we can have conversations with him. We can feel his presence. We can let him continue to inspire us to be our muse, because above all, Gary was a creative person in art, in writing, in music, in all sorts of ways, a modern Renaissance man. And so he can be this muse for you in your writing, in your art, in your music, or just in life. But what we know right now is that we can affirm abundant life, everlasting life. And part of our purpose here is to release Gary into this life, knowing he is in a place of peace. So let us take a moment to turn within. And we know part of Gary's beliefs was this spiritual being, if you want to call it a panentheism, that spirit was within us, around us, and yet God is so much more. He studied to be a shamanic priest, which believes in this panentheism that's in all things, that in the very trees, the flowers, the very earth we stand in, and the very air we breathe. So with that in mind, let us turn within to consciously know the source of this eternal life, Spirit itself. The Spirit is with us, around us, and within us. That we know that Spirit is also this greatness beyond us. So we just take a moment to relax into this greater knowing. Allowing Spirit to comfort us, to be with us in whatever we're feeling. A Spirit holds us at this time and holds Gary as well. That we allow Spirit to be with us in any sense of sorrow or regret we might have. And it is from this place of the divine, from oneness with all life, that we can sense that Gary's in a place of the divine. That his soul, that is light and love in its pure form. We bless Gary's soul and his expression of life as it continues. We let go of any need to know and simply know that the peace of Spirit is with him and with us right now. Blessed be all that is, all that will be in this eternal life. And in gratitude of this greatness of Spirit, we say amen, and so it is. It is a beautiful day today. The cloudiness. I think Gary, this would be a day he would enjoy, as well as having friends and family all around him. As I mentioned, he was a Renaissance man, full of creativity. All the paintings that you see, with the exception of the one there, but all the paintings here and here and here, along the back walls as you came in on the easels, these are all Gary's creations. he both had affinity towards painting nature, animals and nature, as well as he had a graphic design business where he did marketing things. So this one up here is an example of his marketing that he did for a ski resort. And there's when he went to Panama, he was working with a beach resort down there doing graphic design for them. So he loved doing this. He often thought it was a time to meditate when he was doing his art. But he also was a musician. And so I just want to bring in some of his music during this service. And I'm going to begin with a song by him. And if it'll be up on the television screen, if you give me a minute, I'll get it set up. Even though the people that were closest to him in Panama did say that he had a sense of his passing, that he had accepted his passing. There's so our philosophy, Centers for Spiritual Living, there's 400 of them across the nation. It was founded by a man named Ernest Holmes about 100 years ago, who took a synthesis of different religions and brought them together. And he had this great quote that I really loved. He said, "No person need to prepare to meet God in the afterlife. We can meet Spirit in every day and every hour, in every way. We can meet Spirit in the rising sun, and the flowing stream, in the budding rose, in the joy of friendship and love, and in the silence of our own soul." And to me, that was Gary. Every day, he didn't need to prepare to meet Spirit because he met Spirit in everything he did, in every person, in nature, in life itself, that he celebrated this life. That he could find the divine in all life, and yet he knew the divine was greater than this experience he had on the earth. So he was ready to move into the eternal life. He was born in 1945 and passed away in Panama on April 2nd, 2022. He is predeceased by his parents, Wayne and Dorothy Stamper, survived by his sister, Susie. Former wives, Anna McAndrew and Sharon Stamper. Daughters, Tanya McKee Schmidt and Morgan Stamper Davis. 5 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren. A legacy, in fact, so it's lovely. In addition to many fans of his music and his art, and many, many friends. A couple weeks ago, I gave a message in here about being a rock star, and everybody's a rock star because you go out in the world and you express love and light. Well, Gary really was a rock star. He really did love to be in the limelight, to do all these things. He was a free spirit, an accomplished artist, published author, singer. He lived his life enjoying and participating in the adventure of life. He had a master's degree in shamanic international practices, a doctorate in shamanic psycho-spiritual studies, and is an ordained shamanic priest. Level 2 Reiki practitioner, pastoral counselor, breath work facilitator, certificate in generating transformative change in human systems, and a leader in facilitating altered states of consciousness. It's amazing that he fit all that into one life, but that's what he did. I think he was probably working on 4 or 5 things at one time. But that was what he did, and he was full of this life, and we celebrate that today. I first met him when he came here about 4 years ago, and he was part of a men's group here, and Dick and Jay Brooks, that we were all part of this men's group. And I loved the dialogue we would have during that talk. He had written this book, the Awakening New Masculinity, The Path of the Integral Warrior. And he talked about that some, but it wasn't like he was preaching that stuff. He was referring to that and talking about that, but he also listened to our experiences. There was a deep compassion for how to live this life, not only as a man, but as a spiritual being in this human experiences we had. And he was profoundly sacred and open to how Spirit showed up in him and how to move forward in this way of being this incredible being on this planet. He talked about this work that he did that was seeking evolutionary meaning and purpose in our lives. And he considered this more important, especially in these uncertain times. I often divide our life into 3, almost a woman carrying a baby in the first, second, and third trimester. The first trimester is when we're young. The middle trimester is middle age. And the third trimester It can last a long time, but it's when we're in our days of retirement, but there's new ways of being. Most people during this time are just waiting to die. And he was there coaching people in what he called old dog, new tricks, his life coaching that helped people who were in this last trimester of life before they're birthed into a new life to find meaning and purpose through service, through relationships, through deeper connection, through study. And it was a powerful coaching that he did, and he continued this later on. Anya, one of his former wives, said this about him. She said, first of all, they were best friends, that she met him online in the summer of 2006. We finally met in Seattle in late October of 2006. And he moved to the Smokies with me in the early 2008. We built a beautiful round house together and moved in to it in 2009, and I'm still here. We were together for about 10 years. She said he was a true Renaissance explorer, full of creativity and enthusiasm for life. And in true form, Gary, although he shared with me he was disappointed that their relationship didn't last, he was still good friends with her. It's not like that friendship ended because the relationship didn't continue. And that's just who Gary is. He doesn't burn bridges. He keeps things open to possibilities. Not that he was pining for the relationship to continue, but he knew the friendship was important to him, and he didn't want to let that go. He retired or left to go from his time in Napa. He went to Panama, to a Caribbean beach town in early November 2020. He continued his life coaching, his freelance design and illustration business. And as I mentioned before, creating art is the only work he's ever done where he can work and meditate at the same time. He believes that living a life of purpose is what makes our life meaningful, and one of humanity's purpose should be to wake up in the spiritual realm and grow up in the manifest realm. Anya, who was in touch with him before his passing, said he was ready. The night before he died, he was celebrating and reviewing his life with his friend Julio and Tina, and showing them videos and pictures and saying that he'd had a great life full of adventure and many experiences, always cheerful and positive at the end, even though he was in great pain from his health challenges. Sometimes our body is just, we're finished with our body, and makes way for us to let go of that body. And yet I know he's in the angelic realm, in the realm of light and love. And what's great about that is that he can be in many places at once. He is no longer located in Panama. He can be with us here. He can be in North Carolina. He can be with his children. He can be all places at once. For now, he is just this light. The story I heard that when he was preparing to come back to the United States, he didn't know if treatment here would be any different, because he had pretty much accepted his passing. He thought at best it might prolong his life, but he was in a boat preparing to come back to the United States when the boat captain and a companion that he was with noticed the dolphins swimming beside them. They were jumping up alongside of the boat. And it's in that time that he passed, accompanied by dolphins. And if you know Gary, that's fitting. Some people think about being accompanied by angels to the next realm, to the next life, and I imagine it that way, angels being God's messengers. But I can also see the dolphins taking Gary to the next life, transitioning him to the angelic realm. So let us hold that, not to hold how he might have had pain at the end of his life, or only if he had made it back here, in truth, he was content with his life. He was grateful for the life he'd left. And we can be grateful for him as well. So I want to offer a slideshow of his life. And along with that, there's a soundtrack of him singing Imagine. And I love the song to start with, but hearing him sing it, I just think that's fitting because he was a visionary. I mean, the picture of the eagles out there, and just his life, he was a visionary. He always imagined a greater world to be. So I'll get that set up in just a minute. So I just delight in who Gary was, and I think we all do, and appreciate the life he was, the life that he fully gave himself to, that he didn't hesitate in any way. I'd like to give an opportunity for you to share with everybody else your connection to him, a story you might have, a favorite memory, or just to honor who he is today. So we're basically, this is an open mic time, and I'll bring the microphone down here, and you're welcome just to stand up here so everybody can see you. Susie, did you have something to say? We'll start with Susie.
Okay, I don't like doing this. I just wrote down some thoughts, things you might not know about Gary. And I'll try to get through this as best I can. Yeah. Okay, Gary was born on Mare Island, and he lived in a Quonset hut for the first 2 years of his life. All of my girlfriends had crushes on Gary. Every time they'd come over to my house, they'd end up going, Carol's raising her hand, they'd end up going to get and finding Gary. They wouldn't come to see me at all. They all had crushes on Gary. His first acting job was at Huck Finn in junior high school, and his first singing job was in the car with my parents. And I got to be the doo-wop, doo-wop, where Gary got to do all the singing. That's all I got to do. And he would sing all the way. Gary loved cars. He had to work in my father's gas station, which he hated to pay for his cars. And he used all of his allowance and most of mine. He loved cars. He was a cheerleader in high school. He was a Theta Chi at San Jose State. He had a 4.0 in art. His roommate was Steve Silver of the Beach Blanket Babylon fame, if you ever know him. That was his roommate in college. Gary put himself through college playing on weekends. Gary played the trombone and incorporated it into his band. Gary was a Mensa. Gary opened the MGM Grand in Las Vegas with Elvis Presley. And I got to meet him. My parents and I flew in for it, and Gary took me back to the pool. Elvis was laying by the swimming pool. And I got to meet Elvis. Gary said, "This is my sister." And Elvis, "There's a bitch, big old fat, you know." Oh, he was just disgusting. He was really disgusting. Wearing this bikini, and he was just sitting there. And and so that night at the show, when he was singing, everybody, all the women threw their keys and their underwear up at the stage at him. I couldn't believe it. But anyway, so that was Gary's playing to fame or whatever it was. Let's see. Gary's married twice, as Jay said. He had 2 daughters, 5 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. Gary discovered spirituality while he was living in Seattle, and again, he met his second wife online, and he moved to North Carolina. They moved to a called Venus Rising Institute that they lived on, and they were married by lone wolf. So that was Gary's spirituality. And Gary loved to add anything he could to his resume. He was always learning, always adding something. He wanted, if you look at his Facebook page, there's a whole list of things that Gary always had to do. Gary did have a published book, and some of my friends are here when he came to do the book reading. Yep. And anyway, I imagined his soul has emerged with a very bright star in heaven, and he was very, very loved. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Susie. Thank you. Do you want to share? And introduce yourself, if you would.
I'm not forced to share at all. It's my pleasure. It was the first thing I said to Susie when I heard about Gary. I was first introduced to Gary 25 or maybe 30 years ago, when Susie decided that we should date. So Susie set me up with her brother. You don't even remember this, do you? This was way before Zoom and everything else. I think we had email, okay? So she gets me to email her brother, and we exchange photographs, and I get this photograph of this guy who is gorgeous, Okay, I mean gorgeous. You could have put this guy through a hurricane and he would have come out looking as perfect as his oil paintings, okay? I'm the kind of person I could take a whole can of hairspray and I would still have sticky outies, okay? I do not. I am not perfect, okay? And I look at this picture of Gary, and he is perfect. Okay, we emailed a little bit. He was into art. I'm a writer and stuff, and I thought, well, we have one thing in common. We both love Susie. We're both into art, and I thought, okay, we got on the phone together and we talked and stuff. But it still came down to this guy was like, way over my head. He was just drop dead gorgeous, okay? And we decided we could be good friends. And so that was 25, 30 years ago. And every time that Susie had any kind of party, Christmas, New Year's, Thanksgiving, Gary always came down, and for many, many years, we were the two odd ones out who didn't have a date or a significant other. So Gary and I would hang around during the parties and stuff, and Gary and I got to know each other over the years, okay, and became very good friends because we had a lot of things in common. And so I got to know him that way. And then a few years ago, it was just prior to COVID. It was during the Trump years, and we did share political views together. And I had a advertising project to work on. It was, I do dog training and stuff, and I was going to install this new thing where the dogs run up a ramp and then jump over a swimming pool to catch a ball or whatever, okay? It's dog diving for dogs, okay? So it was kind of fun, and we wanted to expand this and get a heater for it, and we wanted to get all the veterinarians in Napa to do therapy training for their dogs. And of course, Gary's big heart and everything, he was all into this, we were gonna have all the dogs around, Napa getting skinny, swimming in the pool and everything. And so we called each other the Duncan Dogs, and stuff. And anyway, and as this was happening, Trump was in office, which was a huge political thing. So here I went from going over to visit Susie all the time at her house to going over to visit Gary, who was living there. And I wouldn't even see Susie, and we'd, treat to Gary's office. And Gary and I would sit there and go on and on about Trump, as Trump haters can do. Okay, but anyway, we became quite good buddies over those topics and stuff, and also the Duncan Dog Project and getting dogs skinny and so forth. And from there, then that COVID came out, and then this was before we were even wearing masks, and we started to talk about how big could it get and how serious could it be. And that was why I was not surprised when Gary left, because he was the first one who started talking about how big COVID could be. And he was unhappy with the country. He was very unhappy and very frightened with what COVID could bring. And I knew at that point that Gary was going to take a leap of faith. And so I was not surprised. I was saddened, okay? But I did know that Gary had become very, very dissatisfied with things in the U.S. And I was very sad that he left, but I understood that Gary wasn't the type of person just to sit around. He was unhappy with things. He wanted to go to higher ground. He wanted to go to a place where people saw things different, where maybe he could have an impact. He wanted something different, and he went to Panama with the best of hopes, and I'm sorry at the way things went, and I wish things had gone different. But I understand why Gary left, and I wish things had gone different. And I still think I'm gonna see him any minute now, come walking back through that door. But I know it was something that he had to do for himself. And I know he would not have been happy had he stayed here in this country. He had to move on and follow his spirit, and that was the kind of person Gary was. And he did what Gary does. He followed his spirit, and I'll miss him always, that Duncan dog. And I know he's jumping into some gigantic pool up there, and I'm just always going to miss him and never forget him. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to share? Jay, and then, well, Jay, come on up, and then.
I'm going to be very brief. I only knew Gary a short while. I only knew Gary a short while as a member of the community here. Jay had mentioned the men's group, and that's where I met Gary. It was in the men's group, and it was a small amount of guys who got together a couple times a month here to just talk about life. And I just saw Gary, that's so bright, that's so positive. I knew nothing about his background or his life. I mean, we didn't really talk so much about that. But in the present, I was very drawn to him. Very honest, cheerful, just always looking at the positive side of life. So when, unfortunately, I heard that he passed, I felt a real loss. And I only knew him a very short time. So personally, I could see him going to Panama. And if you're going to pass, or when you're going to pass, because we're all going to pass, being chaperoned by dolphins doesn't sound too bad. All right.
Thanks, Jay. You'll be after her. That'd be great.
I'm not used to speaking in front of crowds.
You just hold your mic up.
My name is Barbara Merrill Thomas. I am Hogan, 1964. Gary, the first time I saw him, he had that crew cut. Whoops, sorry. I had a cochlear implant, and I keep losing my battery. I can speak a little bit. If I sound like I'm in a tunnel, it's because that's how I sound. This is the battery. First time I saw Gary, he was in the 8th grade. It was about 1958. I was in the 7th. My God, I went to heaven. My heart my very first crush. I had no idea who Susie was. It didn't matter. When Gary landed the role, can you hear me okay? Because I can't really, okay. When Gary landed the role of Tom Sawyer in junior high, it was amazing. I knew that my crush was going to grow up to be an entertainer. Gary was amazing. But then we went to Flail High School, and I lost Gary, I lost Susie because they stayed in Vallejo, and I had to go back to Vallejo. I have purchased Gary's publications, and I have shared them with my brothers. And I just wanted to share that story because I've never forgotten my very first crush was Gary Stamper.
Thank you. Sounds like you shared that with other people. After him, you can go. Come on up.
Hi, I'm Bruce Baum, and Gary was my brother-in-law. I was married to Susie. One of the great joys of my life. The way I was introduced to Gary was through him sending LPs to our house when Susie and I lived. This is all coming back. He used to send LPs. He was on a road. He was a musician, and they did lounge acts. And we would always get the LPs. He would take the songs that he wanted to record because he was on the road. He can only take a couple of cassettes. And he would send them to us. And over the years, well, actually, the first year or two, we had this great collection of music. All our neighbors would always come in, listen to our music, smoke dope, and do whatever else we did. That was back when it was legal, you know. Oh, illegal, I was close. So we're finally getting, Susie works for the airlines, and we're finally getting a chance to meet Gary. And I don't remember if we were flying into Vegas or Portland or whatever the city he was working in. And I was pretty excited. And he's doing a lounge show in Vegas at the time. And he comes in his outfit. We've all seen the outfit there. And he shows up, and we have a nice meeting finally. I think we were married, Ray. I'm meeting my brother-in-law for the first time. And great conversation. And, of course, Gary pulls the Gary Stamper special. I don't even have to say it. Gary always would say, let me get that check. Oh, I forgot my wallet. So this went on for years. So I started to get to know Gary. So it was Susie's my joke of how, well, Gary forgot his wallet. You know, obviously wearing that outfit, where do you put your wallet? So a couple funny stories, and I got lots of them, is once in a while Gary would fly into town, and we would have like a family Thanksgiving. And Sue's parents were divorced and remarried, and Susie, being the good daughter that she was, would make sure she's showing up at both Thanksgivings to her mom's and to her dad's. And she would never tell the second people that we already had Thanksgiving dinner. And there's a few of people like Gary was in on the joke, and then, you know, everyone's saying, you guys eat like birds. Don't you want to eat anything? What's wrong with the food? And Susie's going, oh, well, you know, weight check. I'm a flight attendant. I don't want to give away too many trade secrets. But the upshot of it, Gary was a great guy. We got in touch anytime there was a political issue because our politics were similar, although I wasn't as crazy as he was. And I didn't leave for Panama. They probably wouldn't take me in. She knows. But the upshot of it, he's really going to be missed. He was a great, great guy. He'll always be my brother-in-law, and Susie will always be special.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Hi, my name is Pat, and I'm a very good friend of Susie's, and we met, I'm in Napa 9.5, 10 years. One of the first persons that I met was Susie at an exercise program. She continued, of course, I dropped out. But we became friends because she was going to be in a production at a theater here, and I said, oh, I love to act. but I couldn't get into it because I was too late, so I wound up in the wardrobe room. But that's not what I'm here to say. What I'm here to say is I just wanted to let you know who I was and why I'm here, and I'm here for out of respect for my friend Susie, but also for Gary. When I met Susie, Gary was not living in Napa. Gary was living in North Carolina in a spiritual world, in a shamus, and he was doing all the things that my sister, I have a twin, that my sister used to practice. Mind control, or mind, you know, where you send your own energies out. Visualization, which I still practice, and all of the spiritual things that I kind of knew from my twin. And I said, wow, that's great. And he became all of these titles, which I can't remember. But one thing that I realized, and when he moved back, he was getting his divorce, leaving North Carolina, and then he was going to go down into that great little town and sell real estate. And then he moved back to Napa, and he moved in with Susie. And she said, my brother's coming to live with me. I said, how exciting. You know, you have a brother. My sister had passed, and my brother I haven't seen in years. And so they were living together. And then she would come over to my house. He's such a slob. He throws everything around. I don't know what I'm going to do. I said, well, just tell him. Pick it up or just leave it on the floor like you do and just walk over it and maybe he'll get the idea. But they were siblings. And having my own twin and my brother, you have a tendency of disagreeing, because you're so close, you love each other, but you see the other's mistakes. And sometimes those mistakes are the ones that you really have. And I will say, I would like to just tell you about the love that I saw that Susie had for her brother, and how she mourned him when she heard he was dying, even though it was difficult to live with. It was like a marriage. It was like a marriage. That's how I saw it. You know, I'm from South Philly, and we say the way it is. But one of the things that I saw was a great love there, because Susie loved her brother. And in turn, her brother loved her. And even though he would say to me, you have no idea, I said, yes, I do. She's like my best friend. Of course I do. You know, so the love is what's so important when you're brother and sister, or sister and sister, or your siblings. And I saw that love that Susie had for Gary, and Gary had for Susie, and that's where it's at.
Thank you. One last person to share if anybody wants to. Okay. Well, thank you. That was a beautiful sharing, and I think Gary was an influence on us on so many levels, that our lives will really never be the same. The way he touched our lives, inspired us. His art, his music continues to live on, and so does he in our memories. That we're enriched and touched and deepened in this way. So I want you to think for a moment about Gary, and perhaps a trait or a characteristic or a behavior he had that inspired you, or thought, well, I wish I was more like that. Or you think about it, more of an intention you could have in your life. To think about what that might be. If you were to dedicate yourself to one trait that Gary, when you think about Gary, you think about this trait, what would it be? Perhaps his intention with friends, his creativity, his love of life, his love of nature, his spirituality. What would that be? And I'm going to give you a minute of silence to think about what that would be, and just to make a commitment to yourself to live that trait in honor of him for the next year or so. Just in honor of him. So I'm going to give you a moment just to think about that. Thank you for doing that. I know for myself it'll be not holding back as much, not looking for permission, and to let my creativity flow. How about other people? What, just call out something if there's something you thought about. His smile. Yeah, contagious smile. Yeah. His enthusiasm for life. Yes. Yeah. He did. Okay, so trying new things. He believed in himself, had confidence. Yes. Anybody else?
Susie wanted to get sunflowers, and it reminded me of Gary. That's perfect. Just sunshine, because he's always
Right.
happy and growth.
Right.
They grow big.
They do, and they follow the sun all the way across. Yeah. Yeah, appreciation of nature and seeing the beauty in all things around us. Yes. Yeah, those are all good things. So that and so much more we can know, and know that you can continue, if something didn't come up right away, continue to imagine that, continue to think about that, and reflect on that. So now is the time that we, in our minds, in our hearts, have an earthly goodbye to Gary. We know that in coming days and coming months, we continue to think about him, have memories of him. We're not letting go of those, but we're letting go of this incomplete feeling we might have of him. So if you're comfortable, close your eyes as we take a quiet moment. And just imagine Gary before you. Gaze at him with fondness. And if there's anything you would like to say to Gary, take a moment to do that silently in your mind, knowing that his eternal soul hears every word. Perhaps it is something you wish you would have told him, or acknowledging what he meant to you, or just a simple blessing or goodbye. Let's just take a moment of quiet to do that. Just wrap up your thoughts to him and know that you can return to this moment at any time, to have another conversation, knowing that he hears it in the realm of the infinite. So just continue your gaze for a moment, or if it feels comfortable, take him into your arms, bringing peace to his soul and yours as well. And as you are ready, let go of the gaze or the embrace. As we watch a glorious angel, or perhaps dolphins guiding him towards his nested expression, slowly moving into the greater dimension of light and love and spirit, where he knows peace and comfort. We know this transition to the next dimension is sweet and tender. We see his soul move into the light where we may meet him when we transition. We are grateful for our experiences with Gary, and we let him go. We say silently to him, I release you to spirit. May your journey be glorious and sweet. Blessings to our brother, our father, our grandfather, our great-grandfather, our uncle, cousin, and dear friend. For you, we are truly grateful. As we continue in this moment of contemplation, I have one more song just to play for you. Gary in our lives, in this moment and all moments. There will be a reception afterwards out in the courtyard. Feel free to do that. We'll have coffee and lots of wonderful things to eat out there. So to join us out there and meet people you don't know or catch up with people you do know, we appreciate that. Let us just spend one more moment in prayer, just blessing Gary and blessing our lives. In this moment, we know that Spirit is with us here and now and be with us in the coming days. We know this soul of Gary is in this presence as well. It is the soul that goes on, the Spirit to whom we wish Spirit speed. Instead of being dismayed by that which appears to fade away, we are grateful for that which is, which lives eternally. And for that we are eternally grateful, because we know all is well in Gary's soul. For this we are grateful. So it is. Amen. If you could be seated for a minute until the family recesses, and you're welcome to go out, and then after they do,